Art Toolkit live demo of 2025. Oh my goodness, 2025. Here we are. And I'm so happy to be here today with Eileen Goldenberg. Hi, Eileen.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, doing well, doing well. And let's see here. I'm just checking folks can see me as well. Those of you on our messaging, are you able to see me? Am I peering up here? Our preview's not showing me, but I'm seeing Eileen.
So happy to be here today.
Oh, and Eileen,
with
I think if you can close that
Goldenberg.
browser on your window, we're getting a little feedback
Hi,
there.
how are you?
Um,
Doing well, and let's see here. I'm just checking folks can see me as well. Those of you on our messaging, are you able to see me? Am I peering up here? I'm seeing it. Our preview's not showing me.
So odd.
Eileen,
Popping on.
Here today. Oh, and Eileen, I think if you can.
So Eileen, if you can close that YouTube window on your computer, that'll get rid of that feedback there.
See here. I'm just checking folks can see me as.
There we go. Gee, we do this so many times, and there's always little tech things to sort out. There we go. Let's see if this cooperates with us. Thanks all for your patience, and those of you in the chat love seeing. Oh, I don't know why that's just not coming up for me. Okay, Eileen. Well, oh, here we go. Yay. Well, okay. Eileen, we had the pleasure of meeting in person. When was that? In July at Sketcherfest in Seattle. And I've been following your work for some time. You're not only a sketcher, but you are a maker of other things like felt journals, these beautiful bowls. We'll probably have to share a link to these because I gave my mom one for her birthday too, where you can sort of put brushes in these beautiful divots. And you love fountain pens, and I've really dived into learning about them. Oh, you've got a matching.
This one too.
Oh, they're beautiful. Oh, they're so beautiful. Well, Eileen, can you share a little bit of your background into some of kind of entering the space as like a maker and an artist, and what brought you to fountain pens?
Yeah. I've been doing ceramics for over 50 years. So I did that mostly as a profession doing art fairs. And then I started doing caustic painting. There's actually one right there that I put up. So they're mostly wax paintings. And then, I don't know, I stumbled upon urban sketching somewhere along. I think I was looking up watercolor on YouTube or something. And all of a sudden this video pops up of Teo at the Singapore urban sketching thing. And I'm like, whoa, what is this fun thing going on? So I started looking for all that and finding that and going to symposiums. And at the time I was using rapidographs mostly.
I love those.
Gold pens, which I love, but they're kind of a little problematic. And then I don't even remember. Yeah, I had a pen that I bought a long time ago. It was actually a Pilot Falcon, and it's here somewhere. And then I didn't use it for a really long time. And then during urban sketching, when I started doing more urban sketching, I don't know, I just kind of stumbled back upon fountain pens, and I just find that they're just the exact perfect tool for me to sketch with. And I just started learning all about them. And now I call myself a pen expert and say I have a PhD in fountain pens. So people always ask me questions, and everybody wants to know all about it because they have a problem or something. So I'm always helping people with fountain pens. And now I have a lot of fountain pens. I've been teaching fountain pen classes in San Francisco here for about 5 or 6 years now. So I teach a class of the basics. I actually taught at the symposium this last year in Buenos Aires, and I teach in San Francisco. I teach at the fountain pen show. There's actually a fountain pen show. It's a whole nother tribe of people that, are fountain pen people. So I am in a lot of circles of art people with different interests, in caustic, ceramics, fountain pens, urban sketching, sketchbooks, all that stuff. So, I do a lot of stuff. And then I also get up every morning and sketch in the mornings too. So I have books like this that are filled with sketches like this, like just hundreds and hundreds of them, of abstract drawings that I use mostly with my fountain pens and pencils and things. So, besides urban sketching, I also use my fountain pens for drawing because they're just the best thing to use. So, and now I just counted well over 100 fountain pens.
Oh, wow. Oh, well, it's probably fair to say they're a little bit addictive once you get one.
Yeah, well, what the thing about them is they're just such beautiful objects, and they have a function that works for artists. So, you know, you can do a platinum Preppy, you know, you can do one of these, or you can do one of these.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the Leonardo, you know, beautiful handmade Italian pen. So, you know, and the sky's the limit in terms of that. But, you know, what I really want to carry around with me every day is a functional pen that works for me, that has a lot of ink in it, that it always starts and it always works. So that's really the pens that I use mostly. That's in my kit every day is pens that really work. So, and the fact that I can put permanent ink in them, you know, it just solves the whole problem of ink and all that. You know, with
Yeah.
a lot of people use microns and fine liners, and the problem with microns and fine liners is they're landfill. You know, you can't recycle them in any way, shape, or form. And I see people throw out huge buckets of microns, and I'm like, you know, you could get one of these and use it for years and years and years, and it's just reusable. So it just makes more sense to me to use fountain pens, and there's really no reason not to. I mean, you know, they're really easy. I mean, I try to make it easy. When I teach people, I show them that, you know, there is a little bit of maintenance with fountain pens. You have to do a few things, but it's really not that much. You know, it's really minimal compared to, you know, the what you get out of it. So, you know, for me, I just love them. I'm like, totally.
I'm just so glad to have you here for that reason, because, you know, we love Fountain Pen's Art Toolkit for many of the same reasons, in that they're reusable. You can fill them with different kinds of inks, and you can really find one to sort of suit your personality and approach, and they can be very expressive, and but I think they can be a little bit intimidating to get into firsthand if you're a beginner, and saying, okay, wow, you know, you want me to think about getting like a bottle of ink, maybe versus a little cartridge to put in the pen. How does that work? How do I get it going? What happens if it clogs up? Am I going to get my hands a mess?
Am I gonna get ink on my hands? Oh, probably.
Probably,
Yeah,
but you can wash it.
Yeah, I mean, I do ceramics. I'm a complete mess when I'm doing ceramics. I mean, I've got clay everywhere, you know, all of it. You know, there's just art is messy. Things, you know, people do oil painting, or I mean, I've seen people's aprons that are just they're covered with paint, and that's just the way art is. You have to kind of let that be part of the process. If you're really particular about all that, you know, neatness stuff, you know, I mean, you can do it. It's just a lot more work to have to do all that. But,
that all said, too, in terms of my experience, I usually get a tiny bit messy with some of the refilling, but then after that, my pens I use, actually, they behave very well. They're not messing up my kit. They're not messing up my fingers on a regular basis, and they're fun, and I love new inks. And I'll just give folks a quick sneak peek. I mentioned this to you already, Eileen. We are just about to stock a new color of the Diatramentis document ink, which is waterproof, and it's this beautiful dark red. So it's sort of like clay red that is really fun. So y'all here are the first to know, and stay tuned.
Yeah, I have a lot of them. Their document inks are they're actually one of the best lines of document inks, because they have so many colors. It's really reliable ink. It's, you know, you can get a bottle of it, and it works really well. So, you know, that's really why I teach people at my fountain pen class, because there's a lot of information that you might want to have for all that basic stuff that people don't know. I mean, I've found pens at flea markets that someone took the wrong cartridge and tried to jam it into the wrong pen, and basically broke the pen because they don't know what they're doing. So, you know, I try to tell people how to, you know, how things work with all this, you know. So it's
I wonder, on that note, Eileen, maybe we should pull up your desktop, and if you wanted to kind of give a little overview of pens, kind of the different types of nibs. And I know we've mentioned a couple times, like, you know, cartridge, like here's an example of a cartridge versus a little converter you might add to a pen, and give folks a little bit of visuals if we've got some beginners here watching, and thinking about some of the common troubleshooting.
Yes, actually, yeah, I think my phono is the wrong way here.
Oh yeah, see if you can get it. You might have to kind of tilt it like upward with the horizon, and then sometimes they need a little kickstart. I'll pull up your desktop here.
It was oriented the right way.
Yeah, if you try pulling it down and then sort of hold your phone and then put it perpendicular, or sorry, parallel to the horizon, might even give it a little tap. That usually reorients it. See if that did the trick. Thanks everyone for your patience. Tech continues to always have little challenges, and while we give you a minute to sort that out, Eileen. Here, I'll just pin myself a moment. I'll start collecting some questions from folks. Are there any sort of burning questions from anyone watching? And I see a mention in the chat of a really wonderful resource for pens, which is the Goulet pen company. They're really wonderful folks over there. Thanks, Kate, for that mention. Anybody in the chat have some questions that you've been thinking about with pens? As always, there's favorites, different kinds of nibs. I hope, Eileen, we might get a peek at some of the little customizations that you may have seen as well. Oh, best ink cleaner. That is a great one. We'll keep that one filed away. Kind of how to clean your pens, what to do when they've been sitting in your desk for maybe a little too long. Favorite ink. Great question. Any other questions folks have got? Oh, tips for lefties. Oh my goodness, another really wonderful question. While we're how to maintain them, while we're just waiting for Eileen here, I see another question about the red ink color. And so this one is it's dark red document ink, and I'll just do a couple little scribbles here. And you've got the questions coming in are wonderful. Along with a little gentle warning that it can be a hole to fall into.
I got it.
Here's just a little scribble. I don't have my desk camera set up here today, but of this dark red, which can be lightly blended when it's wet, and then as soon as it's dry, turns into this beautiful kind of clay red.
Yeah. Sorry about this. I'm just trying to figure out why it's.
Oh, that's okay. We've got some terrific questions coming in. While we wait for you, Eileen, I've got some of the pens that we carry here at Art Toolkit that at least I can bring up and mention. This is one of my personal favorites of an inexpensive, accessible pen. It's the Platinum Desk Pen, and see a mention from Lisa in the chat that she's got this as well. And so this pen can take either a cartridge, which Eileen will be sharing soon, where you can just sort of pop the ink in, or a converter, where then the converter, they can be unique to different pens. So we've got on our website one specific for the Platinum pen, can then be popped into the pen, and you can suck kind of like a little syringe ink into it. Oh, Eileen, that's looking good on your end.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, not a problem. This stuff happens.
Around here.
Yeah. I'm just giving a tour of some of our pens. What you want to make sure things look good on your end.
All right, I've got everything. So let me get started with all this. So
all right, let me pull up your desktop, and I will remove mine.
Basics here. Yeah, basics here of all this. So this is the Platinum Preppy, which I gave one to Maria, which is a really basic pen. And, basically the parts of the pen are the nib, which is this metal part here, the barrel, which is this part. And so you can fill them a couple of ways. The basic way is with a cartridge. So you have cartridges like this that come in a box. Okay. Now, the thing about cartridges that you need to remember is that they're proprietary. So if you have Japanese pens, you have to use a platinum cartridge for a platinum pen, Pilot with a Pilot, etc. With German and European pens, it's more universal. So that's the thing that you can do with, with different kinds of pens. And then the ink converter would be a thing like this, which is a little tiny piston. You can see that moving up and down. So basically with this, you would stick it into the bottle of ink and bring that piston up, and that would fill the cartridge, the converter, with ink. And they call it a converter because it's converting from a cartridge. So, depending on what you're doing, like I would tell people, if you're traveling, the easiest thing would be to bring cartridges, because then you don't have to bring bottles of ink. Traveling with bottles of inks can be extremely problematic. So I suggest not. It could be and probably if you're away even for a couple of weeks, you really won't need that many cartridges. And then, as you can see here, you can get the platinum carbon ink in cartridges, which fits in the platinum pen, right? Platinum cartridge, platinum pen, Pilot cartridges, Pilot pen. All right. So two different brands, two different cartridges. Okay, so that's important to know that. And then there's bottles of ink like this. This is platinum carbon ink, which is, you can get this bottle of ink and then fill your any pen with an ink converter with this ink. So that's the advantage of ink converters, is it doesn't matter what ink you want to use, you can fill your pen with it. But the ink converters also are proprietary, like the cartridges. It's the same fitting system. Okay, so in order to get ink in there, you'd need to have the right converter, right? This is a Sailor pen with an ink converter. Same thing, it has to be a Sailor converter. So
Yeah.
that's how they fill. You know, one of the most common questions I get when I'm at the symposium with pens is people say, "Oh, I pulled out my pen and it won't write." And you know what I say? Give it to me. Give it to me. So I take it and I show them how to start it. And I say, you know, the ink that they use in fountain pens is made to dry. You know, it's made so that when you're writing with it or using it, it dries so you can turn the page if it's in a book. So it makes sense that it's going to dry up in the pen if you're waving it around, or if you don't put the cap on. You know, you want to put the cap on to make sure that the ink stays wet. But the easiest way to start them, I always tell people, take your pen and take a paper towel and lay it on the paper towel like that. See how that ink comes out?
Mm-hmm.
So what actually makes pens write, strangely enough, is the paper. Because the way they work is capillary action. So when you put this down on a piece of paper, you can see that.
Yep, it draws
It
the ink
sucks
out.
the ink. That's what starts the pen. Waving it around isn't going to start it. It's not going to write until it touches something that starts the ink flowing. And if it wasn't capillary action, I would hold it like this and the ink would just drip out onto the table. So because of the system of the feed and the way that pens work, that's why they work. Otherwise, yeah, like a dip pen, like this kind of a pen, right? The old style dip pens are basically, you know, you dip it in the ink and then there's ink in the back here. And then when you run out, you got to dip it again, which would be really inconvenient to try that. People do it on urban sketching, but it's very inconvenient. You have to keep dipping, dipping, dipping.
So
And there's people I know who draw with, you know, with a stick. So, you know.
Yeah, actually, I had a bunch of nibs taken once by airport security and spent a whole trip sketching with a sharpened chopstick 10 years ago.
Took the nib? Just the nib? Or was it these the dip
I was
pens?
traveling with dip pens at the time, yeah, so they took all
Yeah.
Eileen, we've got a couple questions.
Okay.
So I've got a little collection. One is if you could talk about any kind of waterproof versus water-soluble ink, or maybe even also like appropriate versus inappropriate inks for fountain pens.
Okay, so my favorite ink is this ink, which is platinum carbon ink. Now, the platinum makes a lot of inks. You want to make sure it says carbon ink. So the difference between soluble inks and permanent inks is regular inks, and I would say 90% of fountain pen inks are soluble. So if you get a pen and it has a cartridge in there, probably it's not waterproof. You have to buy an ink that says, like the Ultrametis document, archive, waterproof, you know, permanent. All those terms will mean that it's a ink that will resist smudging when you add your watercolor onto your drawing, so that when you apply your watercolor, you don't, you know, the whole watercolor, the ink doesn't disappear, right? So that's what we want, is we want an ink that's going to stay where we put it, that dries fast, which this ink does. But there's a lot of inks that are permanent. You just have to, you know, there's a lot, like the Ultrametis makes a really good black ink as well. I like the platinum carbon. I think it dries faster. So that's the difference. And yeah, inks, soluble inks are basically made with dyes, and permanent inks are made with particles, with pigment. So that's why this is permanent, because it's pigment, not dye. So that's like when you buy any art material that's permanent or not permanent or light fast. If it's a pigmented material, it's permanent, whereas a dye is not. So that's the thing. Yeah.
Sometimes people buy inks like walnut ink or sumi ink. Do you want to make sure that that ink is really specified specifically for pens, or are they pretty versatile in what they can?
Well, that's a lot of times the issue with inks is people think, oh, it's ink, I'll put it in my pen. Well, that's not really a good idea. Like any kind of India ink, or those are thick calligraphy inks that are not made for fountain pens, and those will destroy your pen basically, because once those dry, because they contain shellac. Okay, so it's not just dyes and pigments. There's actually shellac in those that makes them extremely permanent. So that's why you want to use those with a dip pen. So if you buy a bottle ink and it says calligraphy ink or India ink, do not put it in your pen. Do not put it in your pen. It's a different purpose. Only fountain pen inks. And then again, if you want it to be permanent, it has to say permanent, waterproof, document, archive, all those terms, which makes it suitable for fountain pens. Especially vintage pens, they're very, if you buy old pens, they're a little tricky with inks. You don't want to use something that's, could break it or clog it.
So you've talked about different kinds of inks and showed us converter and cartridges. And then I see you've got a little syringe in front of you. And we had a comment mentioning, can you fill a cartridge with your syringe? What's your little trick there?
It looks like you've got something up your sleeve. Sure can. Yeah, you could fill a cartridge with a syringe. This is a blunt needle syringe, which are really easy to find. So you don't really even need to buy a converter. You can just take an empty cartridge, or once it's empty, and refill it with a syringe. Yeah. So here I usually have a box of these. So here's an empty cartridge, as opposed to a full cartridge, right? So those, one's empty, one's full, right? And you just take the syringe, fill it, dip it in your bottle of ink, suck up ink, stick it in there, and slowly, let me mention that again, slowly push the blunt down, and slowly fill it up just to where the little line is. You'll see it on the side of it. There's a little kind of space. Okay, and then you take that and put it back in your pen. So you could absolutely fill, I do it all the time. I actually fill converters with a syringe, because when you have to fill a pen with a converter, okay, you're dipping the nib and the grip, which is this front part, into the bottle of ink, okay, which is good because it's going to make sure there's ink in the feed, which is this little black part behind. See this behind the pen there? That's called the feed. So that's where the ink comes through. So the whole front of it gets full of ink, which gets on your hands and everything. But if you don't want to do that, you can pull the converter out just like the cartridge and do the same thing, fill it with a syringe. So I do that a lot. So that helps. And what I do is I take a standing up pencil sharpener, I stick it in like that.
Oh, what a good
tip.
Put
my ink in my cartridge, in my syringe, and just squeeze it in there slowly. Let me say that again, slowly. The reason I'm saying that is because I had a friend who came to me. She goes, "This cartridge leaks. It's got ink all over." I'm like, "What did you do?" She goes, "Oh, I put the ink in with the syringe." I'm like, "Did you go really fast?" Yeah, you want to go slow so you don't get it all over everybody. Yeah, so it takes a little bit of practice to get that down. But, they're definitely refillable, refillable.
That's helpful. Then if you say don't have a converter for a certain pen and you want to use a different ink, and then maybe you've got a water soluble ink and you're like, gosh, maybe I can even just clean out that ink. Like, I don't know, shake it out in a sink and soak it in a little cup.
Well, the way you can get it out is to use the syringe again, fill it with water.
There you go.
Put it in the empty cartridge, right? Shoot it through in the sink and it'll shoot out the ink out of there. And you can suck out the extra water too. Yeah, these are very handy. The other thing you can use is this to clean your pen, a bulb syringe. So you can stick this into the back of your pen if you want to clean it really fast. That's cleaning, which I'll talk about later. But yeah, but these syringes are great. You can buy a couple of them for a few dollars. They're not expensive. Make sure you get a blunt one. Don't use your old diabetic needles that are sharp because you're going to stick yourself. But these are blunt needle syringes, and usually 5 mil is a good amount on those.
5 mil blunt needle syringe. Okay. Well, a couple other little questions that came up. One, is there a good way to store your pens? Like tip up, tip down, sideways? Does it matter? Or
horizontal. Horizontal is the best way. I have boxes and boxes of pens. Let me just show you this is my my morning box, I call it. So beautiful. This is my pens I use every day. Okay, flat. It's flat. Now the only reason I would store my pen up or down. Okay, if you're flying, nib up, and you can keep them nib up on the plane. Less chance of leaking. If the pen doesn't write, it's a little dry and the ink won't come out as fast as you want. Nib down for a short period of time to saturate the ink. You need to get the ink into that nib. Okay, so that's what I would do. But mostly I buy these clear boxes and I put my pens in these and I store them horizontally. And then I have, you know, a few more pens here. So the other thing about, yeah, some of these are beautiful pens, yeah. So the other thing about the other filling system is this. Okay, so this is an eyedropper fill pen. So the way this works is I actually unscrew this whole nib, take this off, and then fill this whole chamber with ink. Okay, so look at this, the difference here.
Yeah.
That much ink?
Amount of ink. Uh-huh.
That much. Yeah. This lasts me months, and I sketch every day. So that's a lot of ink. So, you know, it depends on how you want to do. Some people say, well, I want to change my ink more often. Well, then use a cartridge or a converter. But if you're using the same black ink all the time and you want a lot of ink, this is a great pen. These eyedropper pens. And they work great. So
I think I've read on the internet where you can read all sorts of things. So I have not yet tried this, but for example, with the Pilot parallel pens, people who like fill the entire back of the pen, like you were just showing with ink, and then use like a little plumber's tape or something to help seal the screw and sort of make their own. Is that something you've had some experience with?
You know, that there is a way to eyedropper a lot of pens. The problem I find with that is the way that you do it actually is you want to put silicone grease here on the threads. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you put silicone grease and an O-ring, a little O-ring at the end there, hopefully that will seal it, because this is the cartridge and this is the whole body of the pen, right? So yeah, it's going to be a lot more ink. But I find that pens that are not made to be eyedroppered sometimes can do what we call burping, which is ink just flows out of the pen because there's nothing to stop it. There's no really system in there to make sure that it's regulated. So I usually don't eyedropper pens that aren't made to be eyedroppered. Like this pen is made to be eyedroppered. In fact, this pen actually has a valve that I can tighten up that pushes a rod up into the back that closes the feed off. So I can fly with this and no, it's not going to leak because it's shut off. All right. So that's what I like, is a pen that's an eyedropper pen that will work for that. So here I have an interesting solution for the Pilot parallel pens. You know, you can modify them.
Yeah.
This is a little off topic here, but you can make them so that they're, you see that it's,
I see, you cut the tip.
Not square anymore. Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
Change the tip of it, right? So it's angled now, which makes a really interesting line, which I'll show you. And the hack I have for that is this pen, which is an Opus 88 pen, which just happens, okay, also eyedropper pen, right? Same thing, valve, just happens to fit. You can put a Pilot parallel nib right into this pen.
Oh my goodness.
It totally fits. You just pull out the nib, it unscrews, and just pop in a Pilot parallel pen. Now you have this much ink.
And that pen, that base, that's called the Opus 88 you mentioned.
Opus 88
eyedropper.
Yeah.
Oh my, there's a whole world we could dive into of customizations and
absolutely.
Eileen, I know you mentioned a little more going in depth on cleaning, and also have a little demo prepared, and I'm sort of aware that time is just flying, and I have so many other questions, but I don't want to keep you from.
I didn't even show you any sketches yet.
I know. So let's get a little show and tell here. Beautiful.
Right. So that's the new pagoda that they just finished at the Golden Gate Park, and let's see. This is a really interesting building from Buenos Aires. I was just there in October. So that's with fountain pens. And this is one of my favorite uses for that Pilot parallel modified, is this kind of line.
Big, thick, juicy line.
You do a raggedy ass line, just go fast on, this is rough watercolor paper. And then this part was done with the end of the pen that has a thinner line. So with that nib, you can do a lot of different line variation, which is another thing about fountain pens. Line variation is basic to fountain pens. You can get all kinds of nibs with all kinds of thicknesses. This is another one from Buenos Aires. Here's
so colorful.
Little, found pumpkin. We went to pumpkins. And these are some cafe shots that I've done recently. Fountain pen, we go to cafes. Victorians, which are my favorite thing to draw in San Francisco here, which we have a lot of. And of course, the Conservatory of Flowers, which is an incredibly complicated building, which I love. So that's just some of my sketches. And then I have, you know, my sketchbooks, which are my Fearless Felt sketchbooks with, oops, that one's empty. You know, with different sketches, of course, the bridge.
What kind of paper? Do you have any paper preferences? I know you mentioned you sometimes like rough, but you know, in terms of using fountain pens.
Yes. I love Fabriano extra white, cold press mostly. This is mostly cold press. I just find it works really well with fountain pens. Some people want to use hot press because they feel like they don't like that scratchy surface on it, but I find I love it. I love it. And I love rough paper too for like textured, like the Palace of Fine Arts with like a stone surface works great with with rough paper on that. And then these are all just around the city, more houses, buildings, yeah, more pumpkins. And these are my, you know, my books that have Fabriano paper in them. So I make them with Fabriano paper in them. And then this is Cadiz. I was in Cadiz last April. So this is, I always do a, you know, a sketch of the plane, of course. And this is cafes in Seville. Love the lampposts there. And also with my books, you can put in colored paper. You can put any paper you want. Yeah, so it's interchangeable. You can refill it with different things. This is all with fountain pens. Like this is with the Pilot Parallel. All these thick, raggedy lines are done with that pen that makes that line. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to do a little demo of nibs to show you what nibs can do.
Oh, fabulous. Okay? Thank you.
So that's what I prepared here. So there's a couple of things about nibs that there's two different size things that are a little confusing. There's the actual size of the nib tip, which is the line that it makes. So fine, medium, extra broad, all those, which is you know, a thin line. Okay, so this is a fine. So you see that's running a little dry there. Let me get a little watercolor on that, a little paper towel. And let's see. Okay. So that's like an extra fine. That would be extra fine, okay? Then there's medium, broad. And then the other nib I like, which is a Fude pen, which I think you've used or have them. Do you have those in your shop?
We haven't carried yet. It's on my list. I think it's a really cool nib.
Yeah, the Sailor. So these are Sailor Fude pens. So the way these work is you can see that it's bent. See how the nib is bent? Can you see that?
Yep. Oh, that's nice and close. Yeah.
I think it's broken, but it's not. So the way these work is you can draw with them like fine. You can also draw with what we call reverse, which is flipping the nib over completely, and you can get a finer line. And then if you lay it flat onto that bent surface, you get a thicker line. Okay, so because this pen has that variation, you can basically turn the pen and make all kinds of lines based on, you know, the shape of the nib, right? So that's really handy when you're out urban sketching. So that's good. And then the other nib I like personally is an architect nib, which is, where's my architect? Oh, this is my architect. Okay, so this is a Majohn C4, this eyedropper pen I showed you before. And this has an architect nib in it. So I'm going to just draw you a picture of what the nib looks like because it's a little hard to see. So if you're looking at the nib straight on, you know, there's the breather hole, there's the hole. Okay, so from the side, the nib looks like this. It has an angle to it.
Huh.
Okay, so what this lets you do is if you hold it up straight like this on the edge, so it's got a sharp edge, it gives you a thin line. When I lay it down like a Fude, it gives me a thick line. All right, so I can vary that again by moving the pen around, boop, 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 like that, and that will vary the line. So this is really handy for, like, say you're drawing a window and you want to put that little thick shadow right under there. Boom, done. Just adds it really fast. Okay, so I don't have to get another pen. I just use this pen. So I find these are really the handiest nibs to have as the architect. You have to have them made, however. They don't really commercially sell architect nibs, but they're at pen shows. There are people that are called nibmeisters, and they will make you one of these.
Oh, so that's why we go to the pen show. We go get our custom pens, and then all our friends say, "Where'd you get that? I want one too."
Get that nib, yeah. And then here's the Pilot Parallel pen on my Opus 88, right? So it's got an angled, it's now angled. You can see that. So this will draw thin straight up like this. And I can go down the side of this angle basically, and as I bend it, it makes a thicker and thicker line. And then eventually it'll do that.
Very cool.
Right. So I can get a raggedy line by going fast and pressing hard on cold pressed paper. Now, if I do that on smooth paper, like this paper, very different line. So again, the paper has a lot to do with the line that you get from a different pen. But again, I could come up this way, this way. I have all kinds of lines that I can make with this one pen. And because it's making such a thick line, that's why you need so much ink, because that lays down a lot of ink. If you're using an extra fine pen, it's not putting down that much ink. So your ink will last longer. But if you're doing this with thicker lines, that is using up more ink, right? Because it's just a thicker line. So that's why I love these. They're handy. So, these kind of make a similar line to a Fude, but thicker, even thicker. So that's really fun.
Okay, yeah, so some questions coming up. There's so many interesting comments happening in the chat right now. Fountain pens really spark a lot of passion for us all. Any tips for lefties?
They do market what they call a lefty fountain pen. I don't really know. I've talked to a lot of lefties, and it's not really that different. What happens with lefties is, here's the way they end up writing, okay? They end up taking their hand and going this way, and writing like hooked around like this, and then writing like this. Mm-hmm. So it's a little awkward because, you are using the correct end of the nib, but you're twisting around this way. So it's a little hard when you're writing, when you're coming across this way, when you're drawing like that. Lamy says they have a left-hand nib. I would test them. I don't know if it really works or not. I don't think it really makes that much difference. I think it's a ball on the end of the nib that's round. It doesn't have a side or not. So I don't think it really matters if you're left-handed or not. So
I think something that came up while I was chatting with Janine Carvalhira, who we had an adventure journaling demo with in October. She actually works backwards. So she just works back to front and right to left in her sketchbooks.
Her sketchbooks, she works backwards.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people do start, if you're right-handed, even you want to start over on this side to go this way when you're drawing, because you're going to smear the ink with the back of your hand if you go around the piece that way. But it's hard to remember to do that, because usually, when we draw, at least the way I draw is I kind of scope out the drawing. I sketch it out maybe like this with a pencil drawing, which is kind of light, but it's there first. And then I would start kind of over here and work my way kind of across, but sometimes you have to go back and do other things. So, I just try to keep your hand off the paper, try to keep your hand more up than laying it down, because it will smear. I usually have ink on the back of my hand, so it's just part of it,
And then another question about the Fude nib versus the Architect nib. Is the Architect nib just sort of less extreme than the Fude?
It's less extreme, yeah, because it's not as big of a angle. It's the edge of the Fude of the Architect nib is much smaller than the edge of a Fude pen, because this has got just a bigger. It's got a bigger surface, And then there's pens that have super big Fude pens, like the Confucius pen. So this is the big mama of Fude pens. So this has got a huge,
oh my goodness,
bent nib. So this makes a line almost 1/4 of an inch thick.
Wow.
Okay. So, which is a great pen. A lot of people use it, and I've used it for a long time. The 2 issues with this pen: 1, it's really heavy because it's brass, and 2, it has a dinky little converter in here that holds very little ink, right? So that's the same problem. And you can't, these pens are made, you can't take out the nib, you can't change the converter. There's nothing you can do to put this, like I would take this nib out and put it in another pen, but I can't. So what I've done instead is I can make practically the same mark as this pen with this pen. I can make just as wide a line with my pile of parallel. And with my pile of parallels, I can actually convert that to have it have like two surfaces. So I can make it with one line and two lines. I could make a couple of angles on them. So if this is one that I've adapted. I don't know if you can see, but the top half. So if you looked at this, the way they come is like that. That's the nib when you buy it. So what I do is I cut an angle here, and then I cut an angle here. So now I have a nib that looks like this. So it's got a medium line there, a wide line there, and then the edge is thinner. So I can do this, I can do this, or I can do this.
These customizations are pretty cool, Eileen.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot you can do with these. And then I could take this nib and I can put it into this pen, right? And then I have a lot of ink. So that's always the issue, is how much ink. I mean, I figured out I do about 1,000 sketches a year because I go out every day and I sketch. So I need a lot of ink, so I'll carry at least 7 pens with me when I go out, at least.
Wow. Real practice you've created. Oh, well, you mentioned you've got a little demo for us. Maybe we could dive in to do just a little bit of sketching. And yeah, I'm definitely inspired to play with some of the fountain pens I've got in front of me.
Let's see if I can zoom in a little on that. I guess not. Okay, so I'm going to start with this with my architect. Make sure she's running here. So what I have is this. We have this photograph.
And we've got this linked as a reference image in the description of our YouTube.
Right, and here's the original drawing that I did. So that's my drawing in my Etcher sketchbook here. So I think it's a B5 or something. So you can see on this that I actually used, some big pens to make these marks. And then I used very faint lines for the back to get the tower back in the distance there. But like a lot of these lines and these are done with probably the parallel pen. So, and this is the photograph. So this is actually at Lone Mountain here in San Francisco. It's up on the hill in San Francisco University, and they have this incredible stairway that goes up in this arch at the top, which is, totally neoclassical architecture, which I love. So I love this spiral thing here. So, so when you take out your pen, okay, the other thing about starting your pen is check if there's ink in it. Very common that people start using their pen and they forgot to put ink in, and they're like, it won't write. I go, did you track the ink? No. Well, go look and see if there's ink in it. So that's the thing that I troubleshoot for people that can't get the ink started is, 1, make sure there's ink, and 2, wet the nib, or I take a brush or something and just put a little bit of water on the nib like that, and just wet it a little bit, and then wipe it, and that should get it started. If it still doesn't get started, then you might have to clean your pen. I helped this woman at the symposium, and she said to me, I have to clean the pen? I go, yeah, like your dishes. Every once in a while, you got to clean them.
Oh, and I realized we sort of breezed past that.
Like, clean the pen?
Do you have any sort of quick and dirty extra clean pen cleaning tips? You mentioned using the squirter.
If you have a pen with a converter, basically you want to empty all the old ink out. If you know what ink it is, put it back in the bottle. If you don't, run it down the sink and just run the converter in water and just suck up water into the pen back and forth until the converter has clear water in it. Okay, that's a really fast way to do it. A faster way is the bulb syringe. Okay, so take the converter out, fill this with water, stick it in the back of the pen where the converter was, and squish ink through the pen a couple of times. That will clean out the pen pretty fast. Okay. If your pen is really clogged badly and you still won't write after you've cleaned it, I would take the nib and put it in a container of warm water with a little bit of dish soap and let it sit overnight. Like if you find an old pen in grandma's house that you want to use, but it's got ink in it, stick it in a little glass with dish soap and water and let it sit until it, you got to let that ink kind of like, rehydrate, as it were, if it's been sitting in a drawer for 40 years with ink in it, which happens a lot. I get a lot of pens like that from people. They bring me a bag of pens and they go, we've cleaned out grandma's house. Did you want any of these? And I'm like, sure. So I end up with these pens that, have had ink in them for a long time. So, okay, so this pen is writing here. I'm going to test it here. Yep, okay. So I'm going to start on this little dome here. So that's there. So I draw pretty fast. I don't, I don't mess around too much. There's a building here. So the buildings that are in the background, this was up on the hill, so we were looking down. So the buildings that were like over here, I don't worry about those too much because, they're in the background. And maybe I would just indicate the windows like that. Just a quick indication. What's important to me is this part here. And that's really what I tell people to focus on. If you've got something that really caught your eye, that's what I would draw. So I'm just going to start with this shape. And I would do the big shapes first. So look at what you've got for the big shape. Get that down. Don't worry about all the little stuff. And then this big swirl here. So I would basically give that, it's got, I can see the side of it here. So I would give it another surface here. I don't worry about it too much. And then it's got some spirals. So I just give it a quick spiral here to indicate that. And then it comes up here. And then there's these nice lines that come down and connect.
And Eileen, just while we're sketching, a couple other questions with the cleaning. Do you ever prefer distilled water versus tap water?
I just use tap water.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have distilled water, but it doesn't, I don't think you need it. Distilled water would only be if you were, say you had ink that you wanted to dilute the ink. All right, so you're actually going to add it to ink. That I would use distilled water. But other than that, cleaning the pen, just water would be fine. The other thing you can use is you can actually get a pen flush from like Goulet pens. They sell a bottle of pen flush, which is basically ammonia in water, a lot of water, and a little bit of dish soap. So you could make it yourself, but then you have to buy a gallon of ammonia, which I don't really want to do. But basically, dish soap works great. It really is fine. Just run it through the pen a couple of times with the converter or the bulb syringe, just till you see clear water coming out the pen. If you squeeze with that bulb syringe and you don't see any ink coming out the tip of the pen, then your pen is probably clogged, so it might need to get soaked. So you want to see ink actually shooting out of the nib in the front. If the water's shooting out there, that means you've cleared the pen out. So basically, here's the way to not have your pens clog up. Use them every day. It's like the car parked in the garage for 3 months. Guess what? When you go to start it, it's not going to start. But if you use it every day, use your pens every day. I use my pens every day. I at least write a line with them with every pen I own almost that's inked. And don't ink up all the pens that you have. I mean, I don't have all my pens inked. I have 35 of them inked, which is a lot. But, I try to use them every day. And that's what really keeps the pen moving and flowing, is using it every day. And before you go out sketching every day, open your bag, pull out your pens and go, is there ink in this pen? Do I need to fill it? Because I'm with people all the time. I'm sitting on the street with them and they're like, oh, I don't have any ink in my pen. I'm like, again, give it to me. And I have a bottle of ink with me. I have a syringe with me. I have all the tools needed to fix pens in my sketch bag.
Oh, you're the person to hang out with if your pens are clogged.
Absolutely.
So if you're regularly using,
I have a kit like this. Okay, this is my kit. It's got everything I need in here: a syringe, a bottle of ink, Q-tips, brass shims, extra things, extra syringes, and everything. So I can fix anybody's pen on the street, which I've done a number of times. Yeah, a lot of times. So yeah.
If you're using a pen regularly, do you have to clean it or just wait till it clogs? Like, is there, sort of a hey, or like maybe it's like when you're refilling ink, like what's the cue to clean it if you're using it regularly?
So what I do is, say I'm using the black patent carbon in one pen, and I use it a lot and I use it all the time. So every few months or so, I'll actually run it dry. Like I'll use it until I use up all the ink. Or if I see that it's getting low to the end, then I'll clean it. So every few months, especially with the platinum carbon, because it's a pigment ink, it's actually particles that can clog if you let it get dry. Because I use my pens all the time, they don't clog, but I do like to clean them every once in a while and, run them through. So I'll just take a bunch of pens that I see are getting empty and I'll clean them and then refill them. If you're using a different ink, so say you have black in the pen and you want to put yellow ink, I would definitely clean it really well, because that black ink is going to influence the yellow ink. Even if you're going to a red ink, some people don't care. They just fill it with another color and to keep going. So, but it's not necessary to clean your pens all the time. I mean, like I said, every few months, maybe I'll grab a few pens that I know have been inked up a long time and I'll clean those. But I generally, if I'm putting the same ink in, the black carbon, I'll just keep refilling it until I think there's a problem. Yeah, if
Hmm.
it does clog, then I'll look at it and see if it needs, if it needs to be cleaned or not. So,
Some
yeah.
folks have mentioned ultrasonic cleaners too. Is that something you found helpful?
Yeah, that would be the case if you had an old pen that was really clogged. Like, say you made the mistake of putting India ink in your pen. You might never get it clean, but you might be able to use the ultrasonic cleaner to get the ink out. It might work, but that, like I said, that ink has shellac in it, which you got to think about how small the feed on a pen is to put shellac in there. I knew this woman who came to a class and she had a Mont Blanc pen and she'd put India ink in it, and I was like, okay, I want you to go over to that sink right now and empty that out and clean that pen out because if you don't, it's the pen will be ruined. You won't be able to fix it. So, yeah, but generally, if you're using the same ink, and it's probably okay just to every once in a while, every few months, yeah, give it a little cleanup. You'll get a sense of it as you start using fountain pens that you've had ink in a pen for a while, and it's not a bad idea to clean them, but certainly not every single time you use it do you have to clean it. Absolutely not. It'll work for a long time. And like I said, use them every day. Just take them out and use them every day. That's the key, is using them every day. Going out and sketch every day. See, then that feeds two things. You get sketching, your sketching evolves, and you use your fountain pen every day. So you're good. So
Oh
look,
my
I'm looking at
goodness.
this
Well,
architect. Yeah, look at this. I'm just going to put a shadow right there. Look at that. Like, boom, shadow. And
so
that's the way to get it. Yep.
I'm hearing that one, I mean, there's really so many options and just a wide world to really dive into with fountain pens and
Yes.
can go really deep. So I think I've got a couple questions. Is one, what would be your recommended simplest way to get started?
Okay, so I always recommend, if you have a store in your local city where you live that sells fountain pens, I would go there and ask to try a few pens. So you can do research online, Goulet pens or Van Ness pens or all the millions of online pen places have a lot of pens. Jet Pens is a great one that you can look at pens, but it's like driving a car. You're not going to be able to test drive it online. You're going to have to buy it, try it, and then return it if you don't like it or be stuck with it. But the best way is to try them out. So there's two really good ways to try them. One, if you have a stationery store or an art supply store locally to you that sells pens, go talk to them and ask them if you can try some pens. Most dealers will let you try the pen by just dipping it in ink. You don't need to fill the pen. You can just dip it in a bottle and try it, and that'll give you a sense of, think about, do you like a bigger pen? Do you want a smaller pen? Do you want a plastic pen? Do you want a demonstrator pen? Do you want a metal pen? Do you want a fancy pen? How much do you want to spend? You can spend from $5 to $30,000 for a pen, but you might want to stay under 200. You might want to stay under $50. So there's a couple of pens that I would say to start with. So you've got your Preppy, okay? You got Pilot Metropolitan, which is this one. You got a Lamy Safari, which is this one. You have a Twisby, which is this one. Okay, these are good starter pens to start with. The other great way, which I always recommend to people, is there are about 13 or 14 pen shows in the United States every year, and there's a schedule of the pen shows. So these are places where dealers come with their pens, and they have all their pens that they make on the table, and they will let you try any pen you want. So you can try, a $200 Leonardo. You can try a $50 Metropolitan or a Twisby. You can try a $12,000 Monteverde. You can try every single pen that they have to see what you like in terms of the weight of it, how it feels in your hand, the materials. And like I said, with my pens here, I have quite a variety of pens, right? All these pens from all different ranges, different sizes, inexpensive to expensive. And I've tried all these before I bought them. So that's the best way, is to go to a fountain pen show and wander around. And there are a lot. I mean, they have thousands and thousands of pens. It's a little overwhelming, but they also sell inks and paper and books. And they're not an art supply place, but they sell pens. People often ask me, which kind of fountain pen should I draw with? I'm like, anything you have. Any fountain pen will draw. It's a tool.
Well, I
It's
want
like,
to
what kind of
mention
pencil?
too, one of my other favorite ways just to get to know tools is to go get together with your other sketching friends or go to an urban sketch meetup.
Yeah,
And then don't be shy about going up to people and talking to them and saying, hey, that's a
right.
cool tool. Can I try one? Or what do you recommend? Because as we know from this community, it's so inspiring to learn
Yeah,
from each other. And
absolutely.
Eileen, I know I'm loving learning some of your pens. On our website, we have some of our favorites too, and hoping to expand our lineup in 2025 to include some more. I know, and this time has just flown, Eileen, and I don't know if you're going to have time to actually do any painting with them on your darling sketch you're working on. But we've had a request if you can at least open your palettes because they've been sitting there
Oh, yes.
tantalizingly with these wonderful
Right.
swatch cards. So first, you might have to tell us how you've attached the swatch cards to the lid because those look sure
Okay, so
cute.
yeah, I see people with these swatch cards that are just loose and they just stick it in here and then they close the palette. Okay, first of all, it's going to get all wet and gooey, and you don't want that. I just take mine and I cover it with clear tape. So I kind of laminate it at home, and then I just tape it to the lid of the toolkit. And look at that. I just have to do that to see what colors are in there.
Perfect.
It's the easiest thing. I write it down and I just make a swatch. And then my big one here, same thing. I just taped on my swatch card. And if I change colors, I just make a new swatch card. Easiest thing. It's right there. You don't have to find it. It's right where you need it. And then if I need to show people your name to buy where they're going to buy our toolkit, I just go, here, our toolkit, go buy one. Because they're like, where'd you get that great palette? So I got some cards when I was in Seattle from you, and I give them all away. I give them away all the time because people want to know,
Oh,
where did you get that palette? Because they come out with a palette that's this big. They come out with this giant palette. And you know what? I've got more than 21 colors in this big one. I don't need a big palette. And if I have a big brush like this that I want to use on this palette, yeah, I can get in there with this brush easy and pick up paint because there's enough paint and you can go bigger too. So, these are the colors I've ended up with. I even have a pan of gouache, of white gouache here. And this is how
yeah.
my palette looks. It's always messy like this.
Oh, mine
I don't
too.
clean it thoroughly. If I need a blue sky, I'm right here with it. So, yeah, it works great for bigger. So if I know I'm going out with a bigger group of, if I'm going to do some bigger drawings, I'm going to go over that. Yeah, I'll just take out my big palette. If I know I'm just doing a small cafe walk with friends, I'll take the smaller palette. So, but these big brushes are nice because you know what? You can cover the distance here pretty fast. All right, and then I'm going to go in with I love indigo, one of my favorite colors. Just throw that down.
Eileen, our time has just flown, and you've really shown
Yeah,
us
I'll
all
tell
just
you.
the range of possibility. And I wonder, as we splash a little bit of color on
Yeah,
here in our last few minutes together, if you might
yeah.
mention some of the different ways to learn from you or things you're looking forward to for continuing learning about pens, or if there's any additional resources. In the chat, a few folks mentioned some books. The Technical Pen was mentioned. A book by Sarah Moorish was mentioned. Do you have any resources? I know you teach. What's coming up?
Yeah. So I applied to teach at the symposium this year in Poland. So I don't know. I haven't heard yet whether I'm getting in. I'm hoping I did. So I'm going to do that. I teach set classes in San Francisco here. There's a lot of resources online. If you go to gouletpens.com, they have a whole library of videos about pens, and you can learn how to do specific things. You want to learn how to clean a pen. You want to learn how to adjust a pen. You want to learn, how to fill a converter, all these basic stuff. So they have it there. My classes are mostly in San Francisco. I might be up in Seattle eventually and teach in your store if you're going to do that.
Oh, well, keep
I don't
us
know.
posted when you're coming up to the area for sure, please, Eileen.
Yeah, definitely. So, I try to teach. My best venue for teaching actually in San Francisco here is the pen show
Hmm.
because it's really interesting. The people who go to the pen show, most of the people that go to the pen show are journalers that are writing or keeping a journal or a Hobonichi or something. And they write with their pens. When I say to them, you can draw with those, their head blows up because they're like, what? Yes. They say I can't draw. I'm go, you know what? I'm going to teach you how to draw. And they come take my class, and my classes are totally full for that at that show. It's the best venue I have. And they're just like
Mm.
thrilled. They leave. I give them a little kit. I make them a tiny kit with a tiny palette, a sketchbook, They already have a fountain pen, a water brush, a pencil, and they come out for 2 hours and I show them the basics of drawing and they are so happy to like draw because, you know, most people I meet that say I can't draw, they want to draw. They really want to draw, but they think they can't because someone told them they can't, or they didn't have talent or any of that kind of baloney. And it's like, you know what? If you want to draw, you can draw. Don't be scared and don't judge and compare yourself to other people because the way you draw is the way you draw. You know,
Yeah.
people say, "Oh, I hate my drawing." It's like, why don't you love your drawing? You made it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
you. That's
Yeah.
you. You gotta love your work because that's the way you draw. They say, "Oh, I don't have a style." Like, keep drawing. It will evolve as you draw. It will evolve. Your drawing will evolve as you find yourself in your drawing. And that's really the best thing I can tell you is practice every day, sketch every day, even if it's 5 minutes. It doesn't matter. You know, instead of looking at your phone, take out your sketchbook. You waiting in line somewhere? Take out your sketchbook. You sitting in your car picking up somebody? Take out your sketchbook. And then that way you sort of develop a language and a practice so that every day, and soon, like me, you're going to want to draw every day. Like I get very grumpy if I can't draw. If I miss a day, I am like a grumpy pants. So drawing every day really helps you to draw every day. And then it evolves what you like to draw, how you draw, what tools you use, and your style will just come out of all that. It just happens. So it's a very natural process once you just get over the I can't draw baloney. Because you could say, instead of saying I can't draw, you could say, I could learn to draw. Because you know
Yeah.
what? Drawing is a skill. It's not a talent, it's a skill. It's like reading a book, playing the piano. Anything you do, you learned. How did you learn? You learned, you practiced, right? I mean, you're not going to
Oh,
play Bach the first time you sit down at a piano, right? Why? Because you had to practice. So
for
practicing
sure.
is key, right? Every day, just practice every day, and then you'll be totally addicted like me and have to go every single day.
Oh, oh,
That's what I
Eileen,
do. That's why I love the symposium because the symposium, I'm with other people that want to draw every single day. I
I'm
mean, they
gonna
want to draw every day.
Oh, and the enthusiasm is contagious. And your enthusiasm for
Yes.
pens and sketching and art and just creative practice, Eileen, is really contagious as well. And I
Yeah.
feel like we could just dive in for so much longer into all these and just
Oh,
appreciate
absolutely.
you giving a
Absolutely.
little overview of some of your passions around fountain pens and hope it's inspired folks watching us. This month for January, Art Toolkit, we're doing a little focus on some of the drawing essentials. So kicking off this week, we wanted to think about pens and inks. And if anyone isn't already subscribed to our newsletter, on Thursday, we'll be sharing some more little inspiration around some of our inks, some of the pens we carry. And Eileen, if you want to forward on some notes to me, I can plan on populating our description with some of the other things you shared so folks can go back and check that out
Yeah, and my
to
website, if you go
remember.
to my website, goldenbergdesigns.com, I try to update my classes as they come up. I'll be teaching, I'm just setting up 4 classes I'll be teaching in San Francisco at the Botanical Gardens. So we're doing a magnolia class, we're doing the pagoda, we're doing the perennial garden. So I teach people to draw by going into the gardens and learning to look at magnolias and how to draw them, like the shape that they are. And I give them a kit so they can just start and not have to worry about buying anything yet. And
Make
then
it easy. Yeah,
make it
we're
easy.
100% aligned with that art toolkit. We just want to give you the tools and empower you and inspire you to go out and sketch, and having that
Yeah.
community of support means so much. And you being
Yeah.
here, Eileen, and all of you here watching today are all part of that. So thank you so much.
And
And Eileen,
traveling, yeah, traveling and sketching is the way, you know? Yeah,
yeah, pull that sketchbook out, find those moments in between, and yeah,
yeah.
keep up that creative practice. Well, thank you, Eileen, and thank you
Oh,
everyone
thank
for
you
being
so much.
here. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, very cool.
Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Oh, you still here, Eileen?